Hello everyone and welcome, thank you for joining, where in this video we're taking a look at linear fusion rifles with particle deconstruction, which, as it turns out, a couple of them have the potential to do some of the highest total damage I've ever tested, and with very good DPS as well. This video is part 1 because there'll be another video coming up once firing line has been fixed, a perk on Read Regret that I absolutely want to test ASAP. Part 2 will also be an opportunity for me to add a few weapons or combinations that you, the viewer, want to see tested within reason, so let me know in the comments what that might be, if it's not tested in this video. Speaking of which, let's begin. So, the weapons tested are coming onto screen now. The perks for the legendaries will be disclosed once looking at those weapons individually. They also had a major spec mod, no mods were used to boost reserves, and a single linear fusion rifle loader mod was equipped for all testing. I'll also point out now that Threaded Needle and Read Regret have also been tested with Witherhoard, as well as on the road. The testing in this video assumes that you fired a single round from an ordinary fusion rifle to begin with, where possible, in order to fully proc particle deconstruction. Part 2 will also be an opportunity for me to test some of the same weapons without that, so again, let me know in the comments if there's anything you'd like to see. So getting straight into the numbers, starting with Sleeper Simulant. Now, firstly, the damage from the fusion rifle that I'm using to fully proc particle deconstruction is 38,507. This is Cartesian coordinate with liquid coils, vorpal weapon and a charge time masterwork. And for those who might be wondering, yes, the charge time masterwork reduced the damage compared to the same weapon and perks in my last video, with that video pretty much dedicated to this fusion rifle. There's a link in the description down below if it's something you might want to take a look at. The numbers are incredibly easy this time around compared to normal fusion rifles, with Sleeper Simulant doing 99,013 damage per round. Remember, that's with particle deconstruction fully procced with the 40% debuff. I could hold 13 rounds in total with nothing to boost that, but this can only hold 3 in the mag, meaning the final mag only has 1 round, and therefore I'm not including it as it will artificially lower the average DPS value. Damage for 12 rounds was 1,188,156. Add the burst from Cartesian, and that brings total damage to 1,226,663. For the timings, as I've already said, I started with a normal round from Cartesian coordinate and then switched to Sleeper and fired 4 full mags, so 12 rounds. Total time to do this was 21.13 seconds, meaning DPS came in at 58,053, which is already better than everything tested in my fusion rifle video, including 1k voices. Next up is Threaded Needle. This was tested with the perks Liquid Coil, Clown Cartridge and Vorpal Weapon. So, Rapid Hit and Frenzy has produced better DPS results in the past due to the crazy fast reload speed, but I personally don't consider Frenzy a top tier DPS perk anymore, at least not on a heavy weapon that can roll with Vorpal, and that's simply because it gives the same damage buff as Vorpal, but it takes a long time to proc and not a long time to unproc, quick reloads aside. And while yes, Frenzy does provide increased damage against miners, there's a good chance you'll kill them anyway, even without that 15% buff, because it's a heavy weapon. Anyway, damage per round was 76,475. I could hold 20 in reserve with nothing to boost that, so damage for those rounds was 1,529,500, and with Cartesian, total damage came in at 1,568,007. For the timings, once particle deconstruction was procced using Cartesian, the magazine sizes returned from Clown Cartridge was 7, 7 and a final of 6. Unfortunately, Clown Cartridge RNG may not be kind every time, and you may find a 4th magazine is required to fire 20 rounds, but for this example, with 20 rounds and 2 reloads, total time was 26.1 seconds, which brought DPS to 60,077. And now to take a look at Queenbreaker, starting with the Marksman Sights perk, which increases damage at the cost of charge time. That damage per round was 65,995. I could hold 21 in total, and each mag could hold 5, therefore the final mag would only have 1, which means it's been omitted from the test. Total damage for 20 rounds was 1,319,900. Add the damage from Cartesian to that, and total damage came in at 1,358,407. For the timings, as with everything else so far, it was a single burst from Cartesian to fully proc particle deconstruction, and then 4 magazines of 5. It's taken me 27.43 seconds to do that, meaning DPS was 49,523. Now, this actually beats everything from my fusion rifle video for damage, and only falls short of 1k for DPS, but it's in the heavy slot, so not great compared to the weapons tested so far. sticking with the Queenbreaker and testing with Combat Sight. This does the opposite to Marksman, in which it reduces charge time at the cost of damage, of which was just 47,662 per round. As before, I could hold 21 in reserves and 5 in each magazine, so the final mag with a single round has been omitted. Damage for those 20 rounds was 953,240, add the burst from Cartesian to that, and total damage for the test came in at 991,747. For the timings, I started with Cartesian again and just simply emptied 4 magazines of 5. It taken me 20.85 seconds to do that, therefore DPS was 47,566. This is the lowest in the test, and breaking a habit for Destiny, as the fast firing weapon did less damage and less DPS. Typically, you'd expect Combat Sights to do less damage but have slightly better average DPS compared to the slower firing option, in this case Marksman Sights. The Queenbreaker with Combat Sights is also the only weapon or combo in the video that doesn't break the 1 million damage barrier. And now it's Reed's Regret. This was tested with the perks Liquid Coils, Triple Tap and Vorpal Weapon. With this having the exact same damage influencing perks as Threaded Needle, it therefore does the exact same amount of damage per round, which is 76,475. I could hold 20 in reserves, and while each magazine could only hold 5, landing all precision shots meant Triple Tap increased that to 7 rounds per mag. So this is just 4 full mags of 5, each increased to 7, making it 28 overall, and that brought damage for Reed's Regret on its own to 2,141,300, and that's not a mistake, over 2 million. Include the burst from Cartesian, and total damage for the test was 2,179,807. For the timings, I started with a round from the Energy Fusion Rifle to fully proc Particle Deconstruction, and then just emptied 4 magazines of 5 that would increase to 7 due to Triple Tap. Total time for this was 36.23 seconds, meaning DPS came in at 60,166. Now, very similar DPS to Threaded Needle, which is mainly due to the fact that they do the same damage per round, fired at the same rate, and at least for my test with Clown Cartridge, they both fired a very similar number of rounds from each magazine, the difference being total damage, which is huge due to Triple Tap generating ammo from thin air. And now we're taking a look at Lorentz Driver. The difference with this compared to everything else so far is that it sits in the energy slot, so there's no way to fully proc Particle Deconstruction with a single burst from Cartesian, for example. Because of this, I'm going to give 2 lots of damage in DPS numbers. Firstly, when using Lorentz and proccing the debuff yourself, so the first 5 rounds doing less damage but progressively increasing, followed by a second example where the assumption is a fire team member has fully procced the debuff and therefore every round is with a fully stacked buff. It's not identical and fair compared to other weapons so far, but I thought I'd put the numbers in anyway, just out of interest. And just to confirm, every number assumes that the Lagrangian Sight perk is activated. This lasts for 30 seconds after picking up 3 telemetry patterns and provides a 50% buff to damage. The damage per round for when you stack Particle Deconstruction yourself is coming onto screen now. It starts at 54,991 and progressively increases up to 77,182, which means with both the seasonal mod debuff and Lagrangian Sight active, it's a 110% increase over the absolute base damage value, which is just 36,663. 110%, that is massive. I could hold 20 in reserves and 6 in each magazine, so I've omitted the final mag of 2 for the test. The opening magazine, while proccing Particle Deconstruction, did 393,423, while the following 2 mags of 6 did 463,092. This brought total damage to 1,319,607. The total damage for all rounds with Particle Deconstruction fully procced, so the opening mag as well in this case, was 1,389,276. For the timings, the 2 examples were identical, firing just 3 full mags of 6, which taken me 20.52 seconds when proccing Particle Deconstruction in the opening mag based on the damage discussed. This brought DPS to 64,308, and DPS for when every round fired is with the 40% debuff, it came in at 67,704. More on this during the graph though. Okay, so now it's time to pair Reed's Regret and Threaded Needle with Witherhoard, starting with the latter. I've decided to test these with Cartesian as well, so the method is to use the Fusion Rifle to proc Particle Deconstruction, switch to Witherhoard to fire a single round from that at the target, and then go to the linear. With Threaded Needle, after emptying each of the first 2 magazines, I've reloaded and then fired another round from Witherhoard, as this cycle came in at just over 10 seconds, but remember this is with Clown Cartridge, so it won't always give you 7 rounds in the mag if you're using that perk as well. The breakdown of damage is coming onto screen now. Cartesian and Threaded Needle damage remains the same, while Witherhoard has added an additional 247,944, which consisted of 2 full tick cycles and 1 partial. This brought total damage for the test to 1,815,951. The damage from the final Witherhoard round has been stopped at the moment Threaded Needle stopped firing. For the timings tested, as briefly mentioned, I started with a burst from Cartesian, a round from Witherhoard, a magazine from Threaded Needle, reload and repeat, of course excluding Cartesian. That is on screen now and taken me 29.3 seconds, meaning DPS came in at 61,978, which isn't much better than without Witherhoard, but again I'll discuss that a little more at the graph. And finally, Reed's Regret with Witherhoard. This follows the exact same method as Threaded Needle, as it has 5 rounds in the mag that increase to 7 with triple tap. So after starting with a burst from Cartesian, the cycle is to fire from the grenade launcher, empty a mag, reload, and then switch back to Witherhoard to repeat the cycle until out of ammo. The breakdown in damage is coming onto screen now, and again, it's the same from both fusion rifles, with Witherhoard adding an additional 352,348, consisting of 3 full tick cycles and 1 partial. This brought total damage for the test to 2,532,155. I believe that this is the highest total damage for any weapon or weapon combo I've ever tested, but there is a catch. Total time for me to do this came in at 41.03 seconds, and therefore DPS was 61,715. Barely any more than Reed's Regret on its own, and again, as with Threaded Needle, I'll talk about this a little more on the graph. So with everything covered, a table is coming onto screen now, not just showing the weapons tested in this video, but also including everything from my previous 2 fusion rifle videos. Pause the video now if you want a little more time to look at this, as it's time for the graph. So first, it's Sleeper Simulant. As I've said before about this weapon, it's actually really good, but with only 3 rounds in the magazine, it doesn't perform quite as well as I'd personally like it to. Particle Deconstruction obviously makes it a lot better, but when you compare it to the other linear fusion rifles with the same mod, it doesn't really stand out. I'd love to see this get 4 in the magazine. Threaded Needle now, and it starts off behind Sleeper with lower burst DPS, but with the extra rounds in the magazine, it quickly passes while Sleeper is reloading. From here onwards, they're back and forth, overtaking when the other one is reloading. Ultimately though, I think Threaded Needle is ahead more often and by a larger amount than when Sleeper is ahead. Next up is the Queenbreaker with Marksman sights, and while it very briefly passes Sleeper around 6 to 7 seconds, and again but even less around 13 to 14 seconds, this can't compete with the other 2 currently on the graph. It can't even match Threaded Needle at any point, apart from at the start when only a single round or 2 have been fired. Total damage is a little better than Sleeper, but it takes too long to get there, and remember, these are all paired with Cartesian, so you'd be better off just switching to that once Sleeper has ran out of ammo, rather than equipping the Queenbreaker in the hope of doing more damage long term. The Queenbreaker again, but now with combat sight, and this is even worse than Marksman. It never passes Threaded Needle or Sleeper, other than at the very start due to the faster charge time. It's back and forth a little with Marksman sights, but overall is still the worst perk of the 2 for damage and DPS. Queenbreaker just isn't really a good choice for this kind of thing compared to its rivals. So Reed's Regret now, and this is identical to Threaded Needle, all the way up to the point where Threaded Needle runs out of ammo at around 26 seconds. That's because they both have liquid coils, both have been tested with 7 rounds from a mag, they both have Vorpal weapon, and they both have the same reload speed. The big difference is triple tap, which due to its ability to generate ammo from thin air, allows Reed's Regret to do substantially more total damage. This isn't far off from doing a million more damage than Sleeper, and as with Threaded Needle, is ahead more of the time throughout the test. Now it's Lorentz Driver with Particle Deconstruction fully procced for every round, and it's very, very good. It has the best burst DPS, the best sustained DPS, very respectable total damage, and is ahead of everything almost all of the time. But This is with the exotic perk activated, which only lasts for 30 seconds. It could be a bit of a problem in Master or Grandmaster Nightfalls, for example, to get it timed correctly, not forgetting there's an element of RNG involved regarding the enemy that's highlighted and when they will appear. In its current state with base reserves, you have roughly 9.5 seconds from the moment of picking up the third telemetry pattern to start firing and not stop, if you want all those rounds to do maximum damage. As impressive as this is, it's not something I'll personally be using, but if you enjoy it and can make it work, don't let me stop you. Lorentz Driver again now, but with those opening 5 rounds being used to proc Particle Deconstruction, so with the assumption that no teammates are there to proc before you start firing. This falls behind the first example of Lorentz as expected, but after the first mag, they run parallel. It overtakes Sleeper every time that reloads and by a considerable amount, only dropping below momentarily when it reloads itself, and it's back and forth with Threaded Needle and Reed's Regret. Total damage is still respectable and more than Sleeper, but again, this doesn't remove the potential difficulties when trying to proc Lagrangian Sight and getting that timing right when picking up the third and final telemetry pattern. Let's not forget though, this is also very good for ad clear and fun to use. Moving on to the final 2 combinations, starting with Reed's Regret and Witherhoard. This actually leapfrogs back and 2 with the linear fusion rifles when on its own, hence why the average DPS figure is only a little bit higher. It doesn't really have any significant moments where it's the best for DPS, but total damage, while yes, you're firing for a long time, over 2.5 million is insane. You could be firing for 20 seconds, stop after doing more than 1 million damage, and then fire for another 20 seconds during the next damage phase without even picking up any ammo. As you might expect, Threaded Needle and Witherhoard are identical to Reed's Regret, so much so that the lines sit on top of each other until Threaded Needle runs out of ammo. Now, why hasn't Witherhoard added much to the average DPS? Well, because it doesn't actually do that much itself, so when you take into consideration the time to fire from it and the downtime switching weapons, it almost cancels out any extra DPS, but the extra damage it provides long term does not go unnoticed, which is clear on the graph. Now, I'm going to take 5 linears and 5 normal fusion rifles, sticking to some of the better options from each type, and put them on a graph together, and if there's anything that's clear from this, it's that linear fusion rifles are the better option for damage and DPS, typically. Even 1k has been buried here. The insane damage from Reed's Regret is the reason for all the weapons being bunched up, so I'm going to cut off almost half of that weapon and alter the scale to make everything else a little easier to see. Sleeper Simulant outperforming 1k, although the small mag size does hurt it during the first reload, and I'm not really sure what else to say. The results are obvious. Even Cartesian with Vorpal can't match the linear fusion rifles, but it is a legendary in the special slot after all, and the plucky little fusion rifle has still performed commendably. Recommendations? Well, Lorentz Driver is a truly fantastic option for both burst and sustained DPS if you can reliably proc Lagrangian Sight, and one of the best ad clearing weapons here, maybe only falling short of 1k. It is an extremely diverse weapon. Lorentz aside, you can't really go wrong with Reed's Regret or Threaded Needle for both burst and sustained DPS, but if your priority is burst, such as against champions, I'd probably suggest using Sleeper, as it does have the edge for a single mag. And 1k, despite the numbers falling short of every linear fusion rifle, is still a top tier choice as far as I'm concerned, simply because of its ease of use. You don't need to hit precision shots after all. Personally, for something like a Grandmaster Nightfall, I'd pick Sleeper or 1k, and for raid bosses, it will be Reed's Regret or Threaded Needle paired with Witherhoard. Regardless of what I use though, I'll always have a trusty Cartesian coordinate with Vorpal in the energy slot. Now this would be a good time to look at how these weapons scale against different raid bosses, since we have 3 different types: fusion rifles, linear fusion rifles, and for a couple of results, a grenade launcher. However, I still want to increase my power level further, ensuring that it no longer makes a difference against Templar and Atheon, before I go ahead and take up the time of 5 other clan members to test. It shouldn't be long now before I'll be presenting you damage and DPS numbers against Karl, Taniks, Templar, and Atheon. But until then, that is all from me. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it helpful. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe and give me any feedback in the comments down below. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.